Welcome everyone joining us on Facebook and YouTube. My name is Peter Bard. I am the business manager for the Crestwood School District. Tonight we are convening the last, well perhaps the last, and presenting the proposed final budget for the Crestwood School District. Joining us today is the Board of School Directors, Mr. Barry Boone and the entire the board president, as well as 7 school directors are present with us today. We will go through this meeting, and at the conclusion of the meeting, Mr. Boone will convene a special board meeting where a board will take a vote on the proposed final budget. As I walk through this presentation, I will explain the budget and where we're at. And explain the process of the proposed final budget, as well as explain what the proposed final budget is and how this can change between now and the actual adoption of the final budget. This is not the final product. The final product will be passed in June at the June 17th board meeting. If the board votes to adopt the final budget at that meeting, that's when the budget will be passed. So without further ado, we'll start the presentation. We'll start with the, hang on one second. I don't know why the slideshow isn't going. I don't know why the slideshow isn't going here, but. Hang on one second, I'm having a little issue here with the slideshow. Here. Mrs. McGovern's joining the room, but I'm having a little issue here with the slideshow. 1 second here.
You want me to just make you post and see if that works?
No, I'm having an issue with the screen share. So I'm just having. Yeah, that's what the problem is, Jonathan, really quick here. Let me stop the share real quick here. So I gotta start with this one, and then I've gotta reopen start the slideshow over. So, can you guys see the budget presentation on my screen now?
Yes. Yes.
All right, I'm gonna move you guys over there and start the slideshow. See, but the slideshow went over to the wrong screen now. It's the problem. Sorry about this. Yeah. So where do I go to monitor, Jonathan, here? It's not letting me, because I already clicked it on. Hang on. Yeah, well, the whole thing collapsed. Hang on. I'm not the tech, I'm not the. Okay. There we go, Jonathan. There we go, buddy. Thank you. All right, Jonathan's the man. That's all I have to say. All right, so we'll go to the first slide here. This is the proposed final budget overview. I apologize for the technical mishap on my part. That's solely on my part. So I apologize for that. The revenue projections for the 21-22 fiscal July 1st and runs to June 30th, 2022 is $42,206,228. That includes a 3.7% tax increase, which we'll touch on in a little bit. The expenditure projections at $44,317,273, with the negative deficit in the budget of a little over $2 million. We will use the fund balance that we have established to cover the deficit. So even though that is a negative, it will be balanced at the end. The fund balance that is audited, the audited fund balance as of June 30th is 1.317909. And then we're adding, I increased this number a little bit after looking at our expenditures from the last presentation to about $900,000. So when you add the two numbers together, you get a little over 2.2 million. So after the deficit, or after you cover the deficit, the fund balance after will be around $106,000. That is with the 3.7% tax increase. Now that could be somewhat alarming to have such a low fund balance after the year is over, and it is somewhat of an alarming situation. However, if you remember correctly, we do have federal dollars coming into the school district, as well as some opportunities for bigger savings coming in that perhaps from 2021 that is not. So I'm being conservative in the 2021 area. However, the $900,000 is a very solid number, but it could creep up and that could increase the fund balance number. However, we have to remember that this year does have a substantially high amount of a fund balance, or a debt service payment, which will go into the next slide. I know these numbers are a little bit small. I tried to make them bigger, but the bigger I made them, the more distorted they became. So I wasn't able to make them any bigger without making them more distorted and not able to show really the picture. But if you look at in the 900s and the expenditures, that number drops to 1.7 million, a little over 1.7 million. So you gain $700,000 in flexibility next school year. So the budget, the operating budget in Crestwood is relatively balanced if the debt service payment when it stabilizes and gets into the 1.6 to 1.7 million dollar range. And once you do that, it will stabilize itself some. And I say some because we're not at that level yet where the district is bringing in revenue to meet all of its obligations yet. We're getting there, but we're not there yet. When I started here a year and a half ago in our first budget presentation before COVID hit, I laid out somewhat of a plan where the district raised taxes for the next 3 years to the Act 1 index, or a little bit higher than that last year. Then in 3 years, you begin to ease the burden of raising taxes. And then the pandemic hit. And the district only raised taxes by 2.5% last year. And remember, the initial proposal was 0%, and the board had the foresight to raise taxes by 2.5%, and the collection rate stayed higher than what it was projected to be. And because of that, we have a surplus, a bigger surplus than what we thought. So it showed that the community wasn't hit as hard as other communities were, and also showed the resiliency, and that the tax increase wasn't as large or as substantial as it possibly could be. Also with COVID, we had the rescue funds that have come in from ESSER, from the federal government, and ESSER 1, 2, and 3, which is the bigger lump sum payment that is not included on here. And that brings me to my last and really crucial point of this budget. Even with the $1.46 million that we're using in federal money to substantiate and really float ourselves in this year, we're still coming up relatively short with the tax increase. So if it was not for COVID, we'd really be having a very, very difficult conversation. And I was asked 2 weeks ago, at what point, if the district would be faced with cutting programs at some point, and I said no. And in reality, at some point, if the district does not meet its requirements, there's going to have to be difficult conversations made about programs. Now, I don't want to say that's this year or next year, but it's going to happen if taxes aren't revenues aren't increased and expenditures aren't cut. But this budget is, and I will say for the last 5-6 years, the district has done a phenomenal job at cutting excess spending. Very, very good. I mean, they've done a phenomenal job at cutting the excess fat in the budget on the expenditure side. And on the revenue side, it has not been as great at enhancing revenue, but cutting the expenditures has been, you guys have done a phenomenal job at doing that. And nothing has increased since the last presentation on the expenditure side of things since the last time that this was presented. I wanted to touch on one thing that I identified as driving a huge chunk of the expenditures. This is the third largest chunk besides salary and benefits, and it's district transportation. The transportation contract with Reinheimer is borderline, if not just flat out unsustainable for the long-term part of the school district. It is, anyone can find this contract if they wish to find it. It is on the district website under school board, then you click district contracts, it's under there. It was executed in September of 2019. The original contract runs from September 9, 2019 and ends on June 30th, 2021. However, the contract automatically renews for 3 additional terms of 5 years each. So it's basically a 17-year contract. It calls for 33 buses and 7 vans. The district has to, we're having some internet difficulties with some board members right now. So if some people are falling off, Jonathan, just to interrupt the contract, is there anybody on Facebook or YouTube commenting about losing internet service? Or Stephanie? Because I just got a text message from Mr. Boone that he lost internet service.
I know that it was choppy the other day, so.
I'm looking on the comments right now. I don't have any at the moment. They
Okay.
might want to exit the Zoom and just rejoin.
Okay. Well, Barry lost internet, so I will have to text him when we're done with this and see if he can get back on.
Okay, I just had Mr. Benz report in that everything's looking good on his end.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Mr. Boone just messaged me that his internet's down on his end and he's close to the district. So, all right, we'll just keep moving forward and we'll check on Mr. Boone in a little bit. So the contract calls for 33 buses and 7 vans. To reduce that number, it has to be mutually agreed upon by parties. The 1920 school year had it's a flat rate deal. It's not based on the state transportation formula, which is a standard contract throughout the state. Usually the contracts are, they follow state reimbursement formula plus maybe a percentage or 2 or 3, somewhere in that range. But this one's a flat rate. So the flat rate was $2.150 million. Plus there was a $300,000 in settlement of a lawsuit for the termination of the previous contract. So that was the first year that it was for the first year. Last year was this current year, 2021, was $2.250 million, which was an increase of $100,000. And so this was then this year is a $2.5 million for this budget year that you guys just saw on the screen. And that is an increase of $250,000. So to put that in perspective, the $250,000 increase takes up about a third of the tax increase that I'm asking for in the budget, that the administration is asking for in the budget, because of the fact that the tax increase makes up about $700,000 in additional revenue for the school district. And this is about $250,000 worth of that. So just to put it in the proper context. So when you look at that overall, it increased $350,000 in 2 years, and then in 22, 23 and beyond for the next, I would say 15 years beyond that, it will go up 3% every single year beyond that. Crestwood also pays as a fuel surcharge of $1.67, half of the bill over $1.67 per gallon. So whatever the calculation is, so when the diesel goes over $1.67 per diesel gallon, you divide that. Say for sake of argument, it's $4 per gallon. You take the bill, the difference between $1.67 and $4, divided by how many gallons they charge, divided by half. We pay that half. We reimburse them for that as well. We have another transportation contract with Chivarella. They do most of our special ed transportation. They follow the state reimbursement. They follow the state reimbursement rate. Their contract expires at the end of next school year on June 30th, 2022. They do not have an extender clause, and they will need to be extended or negotiated. They follow the state reimbursement rate, and they're just standard run-of-the-mill contract language as well in their contracts. So that this is the third largest expenditure in our budget. This is even more so than a building plant, maintenance, transportation, or a building plant. Far more than athletics, far more than anything else that goes on. This is a very large expenditure. Now, our transportation subsidy does not go up by $250,000 per year. Our transportation subsidy is going to stay flat. So the gap between what we pay in transportation and what we pay our contractors, the gap between the two will increase by $250,000. Will become upside down on what we're paying our transportation by $250,000. So basically, when I say upside down, it means the gap between what our local effort has to make up for increases. So this is a problem that, in reality, and I'm going to be completely honest with the public and with the board, I don't know how to really rectify the situation. I know that we're going to work on a plan over the summer on perhaps maybe consolidating a bus run or a van run or two, but that will not rectify $250,000. It may save us some money, and some is better than none, but it's not going to rectify all of it. So this is something we have to keep on our radar screen. But I just wanted to explain the increase. I did get a couple of questions about that on the side that they didn't want in the public view, but I did get a couple of questions, and I wanted to address it in a public manner as to why that did increase. Now that was, as remember, that was a very, very public matter that came out of this in September of 2019, right as Mr. Mahalik was taking over as superintendent, and 3 months before I became the business manager, but I was well aware of the situation, following it from afar. But I was aware of from externally from what was going on in the situation. But I just wanted to make aware of what was going on with it. So I wanted to show this. This is a chart of the approved tax rates from 2013 to 2020, and the proposed tax increase for this year that the administration is asking for. And I also want to make clear to the public that this is the administration's budget. This is not the school board. I'm asking the board members to vote and approve this budget. The board members did not bring this budget up. This is so please, if the public wants to hate on school board members, hate on me, do not hate on them. This is Pete Bard doing this, not any of the board members. I'm asking them to pass this because this is what I believe is in the best interests of the district as a whole, from the tiniest bolt to the largest salary and the largest program to operate the school district for 365 days. So just so that is made clear. This is the district's index percentage rise that the district raised their taxes from 2013 to 2021. And as you can see, from 2013 to 2018, the district and the board did not raise taxes to the Act 1 index at all. They raised it they raised it somewhat. They raised it 50%, 75% to it. And in 2017, 2018, they didn't raise it at all, which I believe 17, 18 was an election year, but they didn't raise it at all. And they had good reason. They had a reason not to in some of those years because they had a very healthy fund balance. If we had a healthy fund balance right now, which was in the, I say healthy, I mean $4, $5, $6, $7 million with the federal money coming in, I would be telling you a very different story right now with the budget. Even with the deficit, I would say we don't have to raise taxes 3.7%. We can get away with a 2% increase or a 1.5% increase and call it a day, and we'd have a much different, a much livelier, a much easier conversation to be having, but we don't have that situation. And this is the crux of the matter why we need to raise the percentage of the revenue. And even if you don't see the fund balance increasing now, you will see it in a couple of years. You just have to trust in the process of getting there because you will see it moving on later on down the future. You did have raises of tax, you did have large tax increases in 1819 and 1920 when the alarm bells were being rung of a perfect storm that was being developed. And we're now still in that perfect storm. The storm clouds have not subsided. There actually is another perfect storm developing on the horizon, and it's because of the federal money that's coming in. If we don't protect ourselves and shield ourselves from the federal money coming in and getting used to federal money coming in, it's like the stimulus money flowing into our own personal pockets or people's personal pockets. Eventually that money stops flowing in, similar to unemployment money coming into people's pockets. Eventually that money is going to stop and you're going to have to find a way to make it on your own. There's going to be a point in time where the district's going to have to make it on its own. And that's what I'm trying to prepare ourselves for, because if we don't, we're going to be stuck in a very big quagmire. So as you can see on this chart, it shows now the white column shows what the property tax bill, and these are just rough estimates. Your own situation, if people are watching this or looking at this at home, your own particular situation may differ a little bit from this. And so the best thing I could tell you to do from a personal perspective is take your last year's tax bill and times it by 3.7%, the value, and that's what you will be paying next year if the board enacts this increase. But on a $100,000 home, the tax increase would be $41.92. From then, your tax bill would be $1,174.94. On the median value of a home or land and property in Crestwood was $178,400, and that came from Zillow. And that would be, your tax bill would be $2,096.09, and that would be a $78 increase from last year. So that would be, that would be what your increase is. Now I did some other figures on the bottom here so that covers more people and more ranges of people that might be watching this video or looking at this presentation for the board reference. If you have a $75,000 land and house value, it would be a $31.44 increase. This would be, if you had a $50,000 land or house, it would be a $20.96 increase. If you had a $250,000 home or land, it would be a $104.80 increase. A $500,000 home and land would be $209.60 increase. If you had a $1 million home and land increase, it would be $418 or $419.12 increase. And if you had a $150,000 home and land, it would be $62.88 increase. So there are just some variables, and you could find out where you fall in that scale. I can't, if you want me to figure out your specific increases, if you wish, you could email me and I could do that for you. I mean, I'm sure I'm not going to get bombarded with hundreds of them, but I could look at that and do that for you if you wanted me to. But I just want you guys to understand that this is what the increases would be like if the 3.7% increase would be passed. But like I said, the best thing you could possibly do is take your last year's tax bill out, as long as you didn't have a decrease or an increase in your home property value or assessed value with the county, and take that 3.7% and then multiply it by your face value, and then add it, and that's what your increase would be. So I'm going to stop right there. Stephanie or Jonathan, is there any questions yet before I move on to the last slide?
No questions to report.
No questions.
So these are the millage rates for other counties in Luzerne County. Now I checked this, I checked with some other school districts around the area with their preliminary final budgets. Crestwood is still the lowest. There was some question as whether Berwick was the lowest, but Berwick is actually the second lowest. We're the lowest in Luzerne County. Now, I mentioned before where I think Crestwood should be millage wise. I think we should be in the between 12 and 12.5 millage rise to be balanced where we need to be, where we are financial in the financial picture side of things. And that should put us somewhere in the middle of the pack here. And that, maybe not be, that might not be a positive news for people in the district, but remember how well and how positive our school district performs, both academically and both on the sporting field and sporting fields. I mean, we don't have a poor performing district. And if you look at some of the other millage rates from Hanover to Hanover and to Wilkes-Barre area, I mean, they're in the 18s and we would only be in the 12s. So when you want to compare where we would be at compared to them, and they have larger fund balance, Wilkes-Barre and Wyoming area, and those guys they have larger fund balances than we do. Wyoming Valley West actually has a negative fund balance. So, and they have a 17 mill rate. So I don't know how to say this. This district has been very well run, but the storm clouds are on the horizon. They haven't subsided since my predecessors were ringing the bells several years ago. They have some light at the end of the tunnel, but the light can grow dim just as quickly as it comes. And I'm just trying to prepare for the inevitability that this is going to come. And I just don't want you guys to be unprepared if you choose a different path and the storm clouds come and we have to have very difficult conversations in a year or 2 or 3 about programs that are popular here in the school district. And we have to make difficult decisions about their future. So I don't want that to be a conversation that has to be had and they say, well, Pete didn't tell us about it. I just don't want that to be the case. I know in some districts they're not planning on raising taxes. They also received more money than us. Hazelton area received $30-some million in rescue funds. They're not raising taxes. Northwest area, by the way, is raising taxes in their preliminary budget. Berwick area is not. So we may not be the lowest mill tax district in the county if you guys do this. So I know it's a badge of honor. But I'd rather have a full functioning school district. I think our badge of honor would be when the report cards come out and Crestwood is top in the county. This is I've talked to realtors, I've said this millions of times, the people would not be wanting to build housing complexes here in this district if Crestwood was not a desirable school district. They build them in Lake Lehman, they build them in Dallas because they're desirable school districts. And even in Dallas, their tax millage rate, even if we got to the target area where I think Crestwood needs to be in the 12.5 range, and we can't get there in one school be there, by the way. If we got into that range where we'd still be lower than Dallas, and I would put our students up against them any day of the week. So I just think that's just where I believe we are at. And I don't really know how much more I could say about it. I've said it for 4 meetings now, for almost 5, and I've said it all last year as well. I will say it next year as well as 2. But things change, and I think that we are in a very positive step, and we can't expect anyone to come and save us from any type of, the state's not going to come and bail us out from anything. If anything, the state may roll back some, or stay consistent with their subsidy and not give us any more money. So we have to be prepared to increase our effort to pay what we have to pay to maintain our efforts around the district. So, all We'll talk about the local effort and the state budget. In 2021, the tax increase was 2.5%, but the tax collection rate was strong at 94%. Normally it's 95%. So that did decrease by a percentage point, but other districts sustained systemic decreases. Ours will stay relatively consistent. The local effort, Mr. Swank brought this up at the last meeting, and I thought I would reiterate it. The local effort's made up of earned income tax, real estate transfer taxes, earned interest, delinquent real estate taxes, other locally collected and earned small taxes. It's very minimal, but the big one is obviously the out of the $25 million that makes up the locals, about 20 million or 21 million is the local real estate taxes. The state budget is still not finalized or close to it. I haven't heard any updates on it lately. They have to have it done by June 30th. Actually, they don't, but that's what the deadline is. The basic ed and special ed subsidy is consistent. I kept it in the budget as consistent. I can't plan on anything less. If I was asked by someone if the tax increase, if the board decided to lower the tax increase to 2.9%, it would reduce the revenue by 163,000. But if we further reduce the revenue, it would leave us potentially with a negative fund balance. As you noticed, the fund balance was very small from the previous slides ago. And I think if we continue to reduce and leave money on the table, like there was money left on the table from 2013 to 2018, it could leave us vulnerable to having to have difficult conversations about potentially having bigger tax increases like the 5.5 and 6.4% tax increases that were enacted several years ago, if they're even available to us, or having that discussion about cutting programs. I know there's a lot of awesome things that are being talked about and planned, but you don't want financial roadblocks to get in the way of those things. And by continuing on the path of financial stability and increasing financial capacity of the school district by enacting a 3.7% tax increase now, which is the Act 1 index, which is an index that is set by wage growth, economic growth in the state. That is a 2-year lag, but is set by wage growth and economic growth of the state of a whole. It is meant to provide tax so that the local school districts do not raise taxes excessively. So it actually is already a cap on excessive tax increases. I believe that we are putting our district on a financial path for stability. It's not, and I'm sorry to say, but this will not be the last time you hear me talking about this. Like I said, we're not at that point where I can say we're woods yet. Believe me, I'll be the first one to say let's have a party when we are, but we're not out of that. We're not out of those woods yet. So the next meeting and the closing thoughts, the board will vote on this proposed final budget with that tax increase in it. The proposed final budget can change between now and the final adoption on June 17th. If the board rejects the board votes down the final budget on the 17th, the board will have to schedule a special meeting to vote on that particular budget, as the deadline, the state mandated deadline is June 30th to pass a budget. The changes that are made before adoption will be explained at a financial planning committee, and then we have to have another budget meeting. We certainly will. The budget documents will be posted on the district's website for inspection under the business office, and also in the business, actually physically in the district's business office here. And like I said earlier, if you need any help figuring out what the tax increase potentially could look like for you, you could email me at peter.bard@csdcomics.org. You could reach out to me or call me at 474-6782, extension 324. And with that, I'll take any questions that any board members have.
You would like tonight's vote to be indicative of where people are headed
Yes.
at the June meeting, so that if this budget does not pass tonight, you have plenty of time to make some changes, correct?
Right. So what I would ask for tonight is if the board, if the vote does not pass tonight on the 3.7%, the meeting does not be adjourned immediately. That the board debates, board members debate on what they would like to be the tax increase, and then at least give me some direction, and we could vote on another proposed final budget on Thursday night. And then we could hold this, and then I will ask Mr. Boone to schedule a proposed or a special meeting on June 21st. Or the second option would be someone makes a motion and a second at the special meeting to vote on a proposed final budget with a tax increase of X amount of percentage. And if that passes, I can adjust the budget, the revenue and adjust some of the expenditures in there. Probably would have to come from some of the supplies, whether it be probably somewhere in the maintenance supplies or something. It's probably somewhere in the maintenance supplies seems to be where I would probably work with Scott and figuring out what we can do without, and somewhere in there, depending on how deep the change is, and work with him on that. So that would be the least likely to affect any students or any programs, and then work on that, and then be able to. Then we wouldn't need a special board meeting, so I could just edit that and change that and then effectively post the documents and get them ready to go for tomorrow morning first thing and go from there. But yeah, I would like this to be indicative as to where the board is going to go, so that I wouldn't have to, make radical changes, for the next month and just get everything set up for the 17th or if we have to schedule another meeting on the 21st, if we have to pass the preliminary budget or the proposed final budget on the 20th. Because we need a 30-day window to advertise it. That's the only, that's required by state law.
Pete, this is Anna.
Yes.
What's the revenue difference in 3.7 and 2.5, like the 2.5 from last year?
The 2.5 from last year, I'd have to figure it out for you. If you give me a minute to figure it out for you, I could figure it out for you. Just give me a second, okay?
Okay.
Mrs. Biblet's 242,816.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Yeah, so it would be $242,000 less than what the 3.7% would bring in. Mrs. Otero and Mr. Stucker, are there any questions from the public?
None that I see.
No questions to report at this time.
Peter,
Yes.
looking at numbers right now, even at 2.9%,
You cut out Mr. Boone.
bringing in around $160,000 less. And with the 3.7, our fund balance is just barely over 100,000. You would not be able to present this budget to the state with a deficit, something that would end the year in a deficit, would you? Without making changes?
No, I would have to cut some. I would probably have to cut some expenditures, like I said, from the maintenance department. And how we would balance that out in the end would be using some of the ESSER 3 money that's coming in, the 2.9 million that is not budgeted for, that is not spoken for in the budget, to use some of it for the cleaning supplies and whatnot, to make up for some of that if necessary. But it's not something that's something that I would I would like to do, because we want to continue to build that fund balance up.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, Peter, this budget that you're proposing
Yes.
with the 3.7, is that including items that we had talked about, like a new truck, maybe 2 vans, new hires, increases in salaries?
It includes leases for 2 vans, a new pickup truck. It includes a vice principal and the replacement in the replacement teacher. It also includes the assistant superintendent salary still in there that you would use to make up for that. And it also includes, so I took the least expensive options instead of purchasing the vehicles, and the vans were to hopefully offset any expenses that would be, so that instead of having transportation shortages, if there's lack of drivers, we have some internal choices to be used in the fall, spring, and summer, winter, and spring. But yeah, they do include those things. And for any salary increases in Act 93, the salary increases total about $45,000, making those stipends permanent. That includes the not only the increases, but also the retirement, Social Security contributions as well.
Well, my concern is that we're still in the pandemic. There are still plenty of people that aren't working. And there are a lot of people that live on Social Security alone. Maybe the board members are fortunate that they have 2 salaries. They're not on Social Security, but there are plenty of people up here that do live on Social Security. They're not fortunate to have a retirement plan. So that would be my concern. With the prices of the gas and everything else going up, I think they'd have a hard time.
I'm going to stop the budget meeting, and we could begin the special meeting because it's after 6:30. So we can begin this special meeting. Mr. Boone, is Mr. Boone still with us? Oh, yes, he's still with us. And start the special meeting There'll be public comments for the board, and the board could also talk about and discuss the proposed final budget in that meeting as well. So we can continue that discussion in that meeting before taking a vote in there. Okay.
Peter, could you clue Stephanie back in? We'll need her to take roll call.
Where is Stephanie?
I'm here.
Okay.
I just look like Damien.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say, where'd she go? I thought she was here.
Peter, just so you know, a question did come in, like
Okay,
in the middle of Maureen talking, and they just
Okay.
want to know, is there no proposal for tax decrease?
no, there is not. Lowering taxes would be a phenomenal goal to reach towards, and I'm hoping one day we can get there, but not at this time, there is not.
Okay, so I'm gonna start the meeting, Barry.
Okay, I hereby call to order a special board meeting for discussion and on the proposed 2021-22 school year budget. We'll start with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call, please.
Miss Bibla. Miss Bibla,
Here.
thank you. Mr. Brogna,
Here.
Mrs. McCurdy,
Here.
Mrs. McGovern,
Here,
Mrs. Spath,
Here.
Mr. Swank,
Here.
Mr. Costello,
Here.
Mrs. Haddix,
Here.
and Mr. Boone.
Here.
9 members present.
Okay, public testimony tonight will only be on the agenda items, which is our budget presentation, financial planning. I will turn it over to Mr. Brogna. This is not the voting session. We will come back and do the voting after discussions. Mr. Brogna.
Mr. Boone, I don't have an agenda. Are we asking for a vote on the recommended budget?
Jonathan, can you please put up the agenda? I'll make you co-host. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. Just give me a moment.
Okay,
Okay.
we will not be taking the vote. We'll just read the item and then we'll open it up for discussion and then we will come back for the voting session.
Understood.
Okay, just bear with me a moment here. I'm bringing it up now.
I can read the motion to you if you like, Mr. Brogna, until he gets it up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure the public see it as well, but because it's just discussion and it's not the formal vote, if you want to read it, Stephanie, I appreciate it.
Recommend consideration and approve the proposed final 2021-2022 school budget.
Hey, Stephanie, I
Yes,
apologize for interrupting. I just got a pop-up saying host disabled participant screen sharing.
okay, sorry, let's see.
Yeah, no problem.
Go ahead, Jonathan, there you go.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Let's see, where is it? Here we go. Okay, can you see it?
Yes,
Yes,
Okay, there we go.
okay. Discussion by the board. Floor is open.
This is Mr. Costello. Mr. Boone, on the agenda item, are you going to add what the proposed final 21-22 school budget is into the
Yeah,
agenda?
that
number?
should be there with percentage of increase.
There's not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, recommend consideration approve the proposed final school. Let's see, that should have our proposed tax rate of 11.7494 mils.
It should be 11.7494 mils, an increase of 3.7% from previous year.
Do we have, Stephanie, this is just Jim. Do you have access to edit the agenda to be posted? Just so that the
I have
public
not.
has that in front of them?
I do not have that. Jonathan, can you edit on that screen right there that you have?
Let me check and see. I'm gonna open this up in Google Docs.
Okay, where do you want them to put it? Where do you want them to put it? After the motion?
Okay, the proposed final 2021-2022 school budget. At, just continue the sentence at.
Jonathan,
11.
can you go down to number 1 and then
Add on
continue
to it.
add
Yeah.
on to it?
Hold on, I can't edit it on the computer that I'm streaming from, but I'm gonna pull it up on my laptop here.
Okay.
Okay, I apologize for the wait. I'm ready whenever you are.
Go ahead, Mr.
Okay,
Baker.
back up, take the period away from the end of sentence 1.
Jonathan, you're just continuing after where it says school board. Remove the period and then
Okay,
continue. the
budget
sentence.
at 11.7494 mils, comma, an increase of 3.7% from the previous year. Period. Thank you. Okay. Any other board discussion?
Mr. Boone, Mr. Swank here. I have a question for Mr. Bard.
Yes.
Pete, you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So on the debt service, you have it at 2,448,000, correct?
Right.
I have a schedule from last year that shows a net debt service of $2,241,000. And that's including energy savings from the Siemens project. So do we have any of that? Is that budgeted elsewhere?
Yes,
Okay.
well, there's that code there where it's budgeted at, there is, first off, the energy savings come into a different savings. They come out of the supplies expenditure, so you won't see that there in the debt service. That's the first thing. And I cautioned you guys on that when it was coming into play. You don't see the debt service savings in that. That's why I wish they didn't show it like that. They just showed you what the debt service payment would be. The second thing is since the food service loses approximately $110,000 a year, we have to budget a transfer of about $110,000 from the general fund to the food service fund every year That also goes into that 5,000 budget code. And that is included, if you looked at back at one of my previous presentations, I included that in. So the debt service, so if you add that $210,000 in there on top of that schedule, that's where the total debt service payment comes from.
Okay, thank you. And two other items. What is your anticipated savings from the adjustments with the maintenance budget that you mentioned?
Well, we would have to, I would cut some of I would just look to lower and just cut out some of the supply budget that he has in there already. I would further cut back some of the general supplies that he has in there and just further watch what he spends in there. And code more of what he purchases for cleaning supplies to the grant that we're getting coming in. And that would further restrict what we could spend the grant money on, that we could spend on other things that come in, other things that we could spend it on. So if we were going to spend the grant on, say, maybe rebuilding something in the tech department or something like that, this may take some money away from that, because we were going to spend X, Y, and Z from that if we needed to buy more cleaning supplies and whatnot from there. But we were going to use, out of that 2.9 million, 20% of it has to be used for COVID relief and COVID recovery. So I would just book some of that expenditures to that instead of using it for some of the tech related supplies and things of that nature that we are hoping to, some of the Promethean board purchases to finish the Promethean boards out. Or at the last ditch resort, perhaps some of the wiring or fiber wiring or something like that we talked about last week, at the last ditch resort type of thing, if we needed to.
Okay. And then with the revenue, I see on the presentation, it says for the 9,000 line, $1.461 million. So that money's not really in the revenue number currently? That
money is included in the revenue money. That is actually the ESSER 2 money. We can use that money for covering expenses such as salaries and whatnot for COVID relief. So we're going to use that money to help us balance our budget this year.
If that money's in there, then that number is off the 42.2. Unless I did the math wrong.
Is it? Well, I mean, let me see. Let me look back at my.
1.4 is not in the number. It's listed, but it's not in the revenue number. You know what I'm saying?
I can't. For some reason, I can't pull up. For some reason, I can't pull up my screen. For some reason, hang on. Hang on one second. I can't pull up the, for some reason, I can't pull up the presentation now. All right, now I got it.
You need to share a screen, Peter?
No, I got it. Let me just see what's.
It should be, it should be 43.7 almost. Yeah.
You're right. It isn't in there correctly. And that might be, I'd have to, and that's one of the reasons why it's a proposed funnel, but I have to put it, I will have to rerun. Well, with that difference in there, that will give us a fund balance of, let me see. It'll give us a fund balance of approximately $1.4 million. Then instead of the $100,000 in there. But that's the grant money, the ESSER 2 grant money that we can use to balance that's the ESSER 2 grant money.
Right.
That's why it's not budgeted like in a state revenue source or a local revenue source.
Yeah, it's a one-year thing.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Bard, this is Jim. I wanted to make sure you're basing this on what collection rate? Are you carrying that forward from last year?
94%, yes, sir. I mean, it could be higher and that could generate more revenue, but and either, and that could be, it could be 95%, we get more revenue in and we get a bigger fund balance, and then next year we don't have to raise taxes nearly as high, which is my ultimate goal. I think I expressed that to you guys privately, that my ultimate goal is not to ask for, next year the FAC1 index should be somewhere around 4.2, 4.3%. My ultimate goal is to ask for something much lower than that, but we have to see where we are with that, because I think our fund balance should be somewhere around, I think, $3 million by the time this is done next year. But and a healthy fund balance is between 8 and 10% of the total expenditures.
And what was the collection of 1%, the total revenue?
A collection of 1%.
Reduction.
A reduction of 1% is it would be somewhere around, hang on one second. So I'm just trying to figure out rough estimate, because a 1.2% reduction is 242,000. So 1% would be, I would estimate somewhere around, I say 220,000.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do we have any other board questions as it relates to what is proposed in front of us?
I see no other questions.
If there are no other questions, we'll do a roll call and a vote.
Ms. Bibla?
Wait, hold on. She's in the waiting room.
Oh,
Okay, just let her in now.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms.
Before
Bibla?
we do, wait 1 second, Mrs. Otero, before we do a roll call, Mr. Boone, for clarification, if someone makes a recommendation outside of what is proposed here, do we need to adjust what is the vote? In other words, what is being shared with the public? So if someone makes a motion right now to change the recommendation, because we don't have a motion or a second to vote on this, would we have to adjourn the meeting, or would we have to adjust to what is being proposed to the public?
Jim, I think we could simply approve or disapprove the agenda item as it currently reads, and then we would have
A discussion.
Pete could talk about the timeline, but
Right. So I think
alternatives.
I could yield to Miss Garitiano, who's here. If I said that name wrong, I apologize. But if the motion fails, another board member could make a motion to say, I recommend the consideration and approve the proposed final 21-22 school budget. And I could give a millage number if they want to say 2.9% or 2.5%. I have the millage numbers here if they want to at 2.5% increase, and the board could vote on that. If that fails, then we could just talk about a timeline and and talk about a discussion point as to what the board wants to do. But the discussion should be in public, because budget discussion isn't one of the covered things for executive session. So it should be all in the public. And then we can just go forward from there as to what you guys really want to see done. And we can move forward from there. Go from there, have another budget meeting before the 17th, or schedule another special meeting next Monday. Do that, do whatever you guys want to do. But that's what I think should be what happens next. But yeah, I think we can start back over with the roll call, and then if there's any public testimony or questions, and then vote on it.
You also have to keep in, hi, this is Attorney Garitano. You also have to keep in mind that the budget has to be available to the public for 30 days before the vote. So that is why the meeting was held today, in order to be available for 30 days before June 17th. And I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow what you were saying, Mr. Bard, about if their proposal versus if like the decrease in millage or what exactly you were
Yeah,
saying there.
Yeah, I was just saying if they just changed their mind on if they wanted to, or if they voted on a different millage rate, I would just have to change the state document and then just get it out there forever for placement. And then it will be out there for 30 days. And then it will be okay to be voted on the 17th of June. If not, then we'd have to schedule a special board meeting 30 days after, whenever it gets approved, whether it be on the 20th of May or if they schedule another meeting to vote on it, after that, whenever, whatever they vote on. Yeah, it just has to be. So we have to vote on a proposed final budget, at some point. It is just a procedural thing technically, but I would like this to be where the board kind of puts, where they are, and then so that the administration knows kind of where they are at. So we can make our decisions and plan for that.
Okay.
Okay. Roll call.
Ms. Bibla,
This is just for a roll call for attendance, not for voting, just so you know.
okay.
Here.
Mr. Brogna,
Here.
Mrs. McCurdy,
Here.
Mrs. Spath,
Here.
Mrs. McGovern,
Here,
Mr. Swank,
Present.
Mr. Costello,
Here.
Mrs. Haddix,
Here.
and Mr. Boone.
Here.
9 members present.
Okay. Financial planning, Mr. Brogna.
I'll be seeking a motion in a second to approve the budget as recommended by our business manager, and that is the proposed final 2021-2022 school budget of 11.7494 mils, an increase of 3.7 from the previous year. Do we have a motion?
Motion, Mrs. Spath.
Motion by Mrs. Spath. Do we have a second?
Second, Mrs. McCurdy.
Mrs. Bibla,
No.
Mr. Brogna,
Yes.
Mrs. McCurdy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
no,
Mrs. Spath,
Yes.
Mr. Swank,
No.
Mr. Costello,
No.
Mrs. Haddix,
Yes.
Mr. Boone, Mr. Boone, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was muted. Yes.
So that is 5 yeses and 4 nos. Motion carried.
Okay, next scheduled board work session, May 20th at 6:30. Will be live streamed, not in person. That will be live streamed. And need a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Motion.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Bibla,
Yes.
Mr. Brogna,
Yes.
Mrs. McCurdy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
yes.
Mrs. Spath,
Yes.
Mr. Swank,
Yes.
Mr. Costello,
Yes.
Mrs. Haddix,
Yes.
and Mr. Boone.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay, thank you. We are adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thank you.